You feel it every time you check your mortgage payment, look at your car loan, or walk through the grocery store. Everything is getting more expensive. Public anger usually targets whoever happens to be in the Oval Office or focuses on corporate greed. But your financial reality is shaped by a different power. The true architect of your economic life operates out of this specific building in Washington, D.C. It's called the Federal Reserve. Congress created it, but it operates under rules that make it entirely unaccountable to you. Its regional banks are technically owned by the private financial institutions they regulate. Its inner workings are shielded from standard Freedom of Information Act requests, and the people making the decisions serve 14-year terms, making them effectively impossible for any president to remove. You will never cast a ballot for the leadership of the Federal Reserve. Yet the people inside those walls possess absolute control over the value of every dollar you earn and every dollar you will ever save. To understand how a private group gained this much power, we have to look at how they designed it. In November 1910, a group of men traveled under false names to a private retreat off the coast of Georgia called Jekyll Island. The men gathered at that resort were the most powerful banking figures in America and agents for European financial empires. They met in absolute secrecy because they knew the public deeply distrusted Wall Street. Over several days, they drafted the blueprint for a centralized institution that would control American credit while appearing to be a government agency. That blueprint became the Federal Reserve Act. It was pushed through Congress, and President Woodrow Wilson signed it into law on December 23, 1913, while most lawmakers were home for the holidays. That signature transferred ultimate authority over the United States economy away from democratic oversight. Control over the nation's money was handed to a centralized structure built by and largely for the banking industry. Today, that power is exercised in a boardroom where a group called the Federal Open Market Committee meets privately 8 times a year. The primary tool they use to manage the economy is called the federal funds rate. It sounds highly technical, but it's simply the interest rate that banks charge each other to borrow money overnight. When the committee moves that overnight rate, the effect cascades through the entire financial system. Because it costs banks more to borrow, they immediately raise the rates they charge you for mortgages, credit cards, and auto loans. The committee pulls this one lever, and within days, the cost of borrowing money changes for everyone in the country. No member of Congress gets a vote on it, and no presidential signature is required. Consider the impact on a typical family budget. In early 2022, buying a $400,000 home with a 3.2% mortgage meant a monthly payment of about $1,700. Then, the Federal Reserve aggressively hiked rates. By late 2023, the rate for that identical house hit 7.5%, driving the monthly payment up to nearly $2,800. Over the 30-year life of that loan, the Fed's decision adds $384,000 in additional interest. You are paying the bank nearly the entire value of the home a second time, simply because borrowing costs were adjusted in Washington. The math hits every corner of your life. Average auto loan rates nearly doubled in that same window, adding hundreds of dollars a year to the cost of financing a vehicle. The Federal Reserve calls this demand destruction. They intentionally make your financial life painful enough that you stop spending, which forces businesses to cut costs and lay off workers. Setting interest rates is only half the equation. The Fed also has the legal authority to generate new dollars from absolutely nothing. By electronically creating money to purchase financial assets, the Fed expands the total money supply at will. This chart shows the total assets held on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. For decades, it hovered under $1 trillion. But following the 2008 crisis and the 2020 pandemic, the Fed aggressively expanded the supply, which surged past $9 trillion. When you flood the system with trillions of new dollars, while the actual supply of goods stays the same, the value of every dollar you hold drops. The goods didn't become more valuable. Your money simply became more common. This creates a mathematical trap for savers. If you keep your wealth in a bank account earning a 1% yield while inflation runs at 3%, you are losing 2% of your real purchasing power every year. High grocery bills are the direct, predictable outcome of this monetary expansion. This is a hidden tax on your savings, imposed by an institution you cannot vote out of office. You cannot change the structure of the Federal Reserve, but you can map its cycles. Once you understand the hidden levers, you can align your decisions to protect your wealth. The first strategy is watching the interest rate cycle. When the Fed is aggressively raising rates, your priority should be paying down variable rate debt. When they pivot to cutting rates towards zero, that is the window to lock in long-term fixed financing for large assets. The second strategy is protecting yourself against money printing. Because the Fed will inevitably expand the money supply during the next crisis, holding significant net worth in cash guarantees your wealth will erode. To shield your purchasing power, you must own assets the Fed cannot print. This means holding equity in businesses that can raise prices, securing real estate, and owning finite commodities like gold. The architects in Washington will continue dictating the economic environment, but by understanding their levers, you can anticipate their moves and build a financial fortress that protects your future from their decisions.